Captain Phipps was famous in his lifetime for recovering a large treasure from a sunken Spanish galleon in 1686. Let's learn more about what happened.
Sir William Phips and the Silver Ship. From Jamaica he sailed to Hispaniola. There his fluent persuasiveness came again into play. He met a very old man, Spaniard or Portuguese, who was said to know where the treasure ship lay, and by the policy of his address wormed from him some further information about the treasure ship. The old man told him that it had been wrecked on a reef of shoals a few leagues from Hispaniola, and just north of Port de la Plata, which place got its name from the landing there of a boatload of soldiers with plate saved from the sinking vessel. Phipps proceeded thither and searched narrowly, but without avail. The sea held its treasures well. The charmed spot was not to be found. The new crew also seemed growing mutinous. Phipps had had enough of mutiny. He hoisted sail and made the best of his way back to England. Here trouble and annoyance awaited him. He found powerful enemies. Doubtless ridicule also met his projects. To plough the bottom of the Atlantic in search of a ship that had gone down 50 years before certainly seemed to yield fair food for mirth. Yet the polite behavior, the plausible speech, the enthusiasm and energy of the man had their effect. He won friends among the higher nobility. The story of the mutiny and of its bold suppression had also its effect. A man who could attack a horde of armed mutineers with his bare fists, a man so ready and resolute in time of danger, so unflinchingly persevering in time of discouragement, was the man to succeed if success were possible. Finally, the Duke of Albemarle and some others agreed to supply funds for the expedition, and Captain Phipps in no long time had another ship under his feet and was once more upon the seas. His ship was now accompanied by a tender. He had contrived many instruments to aid him in his search. It is said that he invented the diving bell. There was certainly one used by him, but it may have been an old device, improved by his Yankee ingenuity. Port de la Plata was reached in due time, the year being 1684 or 1685. Here Phipps had a large canoe or periago made, fitted for 8 or 10 oars. It was hollowed out from the trunk of a cotton tree. He used his own hands and adze in the work, enduring much hardship, and lying abroad in the woods many nights together. The shoals where search was to be made were known by the name of the boilers. They lay only 2 or 3 feet below the surface, yet their sloping sides were so steep that, says one author, a ship striking on them would immediately sink down, who could say how many fathom, into the ocean. The tender and the periago were anchored near these dangerous shoals, and the work went on from them. Days passed, still of fruitless labour. The men, as they said, could make nothing of all their peeping among the boilers. Fortunately they had calm weather and a quiet sea, and could all day long pursue their labours around and among the shoals. A day came in which one of them, looking far down into the smooth water, saw what is known as a sea-feather, one of the attractive products of those gardens of the sea, growing out of what seemed a rock below him. He turned to an Indian diver and asked him to dive down and bring it up. "We will take it to the captain," he said. "It is tiresome going back always empty-handed." The diver made the leap. In a minute he was back with the sea-feather in his hand. There were signs of excitement on his dusky face as he climbed into the boat. He had indeed a surprising story to tell. "I saw great guns down there," he said. "What? Guns?" was the general cry. "Yes, great guns, as from some ship." Guns! The despondency of the crew at once changed to ardent enthusiasm. Had they at length hit upon the spot for which they had so long sought in vain? The Indian was told to dive again and see what could be found. He did so. When he came up, their eyes were ready to start from their heads, for he bore with him an object of infinite promise to their wealth-craving souls. It was a lump of silver, a sow they called it, worth some 200 or 300 pounds in money. The search was over, the spot was found, fortune lay within their reach. Marking the spot with a buoy, they rowed back to the ship on which the captain had remained. Here they, disposed to have some sport, declared with long faces that the affair had better come to an end. They were wasting time and labour. The sea had no treasure to yield. "If we were wise, Captain," said the leading speaker, "we'd pull up stakes and sail back for merry old England. There's nothing but failure here. As much work done in digging and dredging at home would bring tenfold more profit." Phipps listened in silence to him and the others, looking from face to face. "Our disappointments have been many," he replied, in a calm and resolute tone, "yet I do not despair. I am determined to wait patiently on God's providence. "We will find the treasure ship yet, my lads. Do not lose courage." Turning his gaze to one side as he spoke, he started violently, and then asked in a tone so constrained that it seemed the voice of agony, "Why, what is this? Whence comes this?" He had caught sight of the sow of silver, which they had cunningly laid a little out of direct vision. "It is silver, Captain Phipps," said the spokesman. "We did but jest with you. That came from the bottom of the sea. All is well. We have found the treasure ship." "Then thanks be to God, we are made!" cried the captain, clasping his hands in fervent thankfulness. There was no longer any lack of energy in the labor. All hands went to work with a hearty good will. Curiosity to learn what the sea had to yield wrought upon them as much as desire for reward. Up came the silver, sow after sow. In a short time they had brought up no less than 32 tons of this precious metal, with 6 tons besides, that were raised and appropriated by a Captain Adderley of Providence, whom Phipps had engaged to help him, and who took this means of helping himself. His crew was small, but his diligence great. The silver was not all in sows. Much of it was coined, and this coined silver was in many cases covered with a crust, several inches thick, of limestone-like material. It came out in great lumps, the crust needing to be broken with iron tools, when out would tumble whole bushels of rusty pieces of 8. Nor was the treasure confined to silver. There came up gold in large quantities, and also pearls and other precious stones. The Spaniards had gleaned actively in those days of old, when the treasures of Peru were theirs for the taking, and the ocean, its secret hiding-place once found, yielded generously. In short, the treasure recovered is said to have been worth nearly 300,000 pounds sterling. They did not exhaust the deposit. Their provisions failed, and they had to leave before the work was completed. Others who came after them were well paid for their labor. The treasure on board, Captain Phipps had new trouble. The men, seeing such vast litters of silver sows and pigs come on board, were not content with ordinary sailors' pay. They might even be tempted to seize the ship and take its rich lading for themselves. Phipps was in great apprehension. He had not forgotten the conduct of his former crew. He did his utmost to gain the friendship of his men, and promised them a handsome reward for their services, even if he had to give them all his own share. England was reached in safety, and the kingdom electrified by the story of Captain Phipps' success. The romantic incidents of the narrative attracted universal attention. Phipps was the hero of the hour. Some of his enemies, it is true, did their utmost to make him a wronged hero. They diligently sought to persuade James II., then on the throne, to seize the whole treasure as the appanage of the crown, and not to be content with the tithe to which his prerogative entitled him. James II. was tyrannical, but not unjust. He refused to rob the mariners. Captain Phipps, he said, he saw to be a person of that honesty, ability, and fidelity that he should not want his countenance. Phipps was certainly honest, so much so indeed that little of the treasure came to him. His promises to his men were carefully kept. His employers were paid the last penny of their dues. In the end, out of the whole, there remained to himself less than 16,000 pounds. The Duke of Albemarle, moved by admiration for this honesty, gave him as a present from his wife a gold cup of the value of nearly 1,000 pounds. As for the king, he was so pleased with the whole conduct of the adventurer, and perhaps so charmed by Phipps's silvery speech, that he conferred on him the honour of knighthood, and the plain Kennebec boy became Sir William Phips, and a member of the aristocracy of England. Everyone acknowledged that the discovery owed his success to merit, not to luck. He was evidently a man of the highest capacity, and might, had he chosen, have filled high places and gained great honours in England. But America was his native land, and he was not to be kept from its shores. He became such a favourite at court that one day, when King James was particularly gracious to him, and asked him what favour he desired, he replied that he asked nothing for himself, but hoped that the king would restore to his native province its lost liberties, by returning the charter of which it had been deprived. "Anything but that," exclaimed James, who had no idea of restoring liberty to motherland or colony. He appointed Phipps, however, High Sheriff of New England, and the adventurer returned home as a man of power and station. On his way there, he visited the silver ship again, and succeeded in adding something of value to his fortune. Then, sailing to Boston, he rejoined his wife after a 5 years' absence, and to complete the realization of his predictions, immediately began to build himself a fair brick house in Green Lane. We have finished our story, which was to tell how the sheep boy of the Kennebec rose to be the High Sheriff of New England, with the privilege of writing Sir before his name. His afterlife was little less memorable than the part of it told. King James was soon driven from the throne, and King William took his place, but Sir William Phips retained his power and influence. In 1690 he led an army against Port Royal in Acadia, took it, and came back to receive the plaudits of the Bostonians. He next attempted to conquer all Canada from the French, attacked Quebec with a strong force, but was repulsed, largely in consequence of a storm that scattered his ships. The Bostonians had now no plaudits for him. The expedition had cost New England about £40,000, and there was not a penny in the treasury. The difficulty was overcome by the issue of treasury notes, an expedient which was not adopted in England till 5 years afterward. Charles Montague, the alleged inventor of exchequer bills, doubtless owed his idea to the sharp-witted Bostonians. The beginning of 1692 found Sir William again in England, whence he came back to his native land as Captain General and Governor-in-Chief of the colony of Massachusetts. From sheep boy he had risen to the title of Your Excellency. Phips was governor of Massachusetts during the witchcraft delusion. The part he took in it was not a very active one, but when, in 1693, he found that grand juries were beginning to throw out indictments and petit juries to return verdicts of not guilty, he ended the whole mad business by emptying the prisons, then containing about 150 persons committed, while over 200 more were accused. In 1693, Governor Phips led an expedition against the Indians of Maine, and forced them to conclude a treaty of peace. In 1694 he went to England to answer certain accusations against his conduct as governor, and here was taken suddenly sick, and died February 18, 1695. The noble house of Phips, thus instituted, has steadily grown in rank and dignity since that date, bearing successively the titles of Baron, Viscount, Earl, until finally in 1838 a Phips attained the rank of Marquis of Normandy. It is a remarkable development from the life of that poor boy, one of a family of 26, whose early life was spent in tending sheep in the wilderness of Maine.
I'm Mark Vinette, and I hope you're enjoying the ride.